People Can Fly was a Polish developer coming off the success of their joint development of Gears of War, their hand in Fortnite Save the World, which we covered on this channel, and their own unique title, Bulletstorm. Known for being a talented upstart, they would have aspirations for something greater than ports and joint projects, something even greater than Bulletstorm, which was a quality project in its own right. Outriders was set to be People Can Fly's most ambitious project yet, so much so that they were needing to team up with publisher Square Enix to handle their funding and grow their team. Outriders was an interesting blend of an action combat shooter RPG, sort of like Destiny Gears or Borderlands Destiny, you get the idea, would launch back in April 1st of 2021. Much like the comparisons imply, Outriders was a cooperative, always-online looter title, utilizing a blend of single-player and group in-game content. Outriders was able to impress and attract over 3 million players very early on, but although they outperformed another Square Enix stablemate we covered on the series Marvel Avengers, they would reach a similar fate and find themselves on this series after a drop from a peak of 125,000 players to a shockingly low recent 900 players. Almost 2 years after launch, Outriders, since their last expansion, nerdSlayer especially, has seen very little content and worse, complete radio silence and neglect. While the project is still ongoing, the latest update was in August of 2022, and People Can Fly declared that the project most recently wasn't profitable. So it sits in this odd limbo we often find many video games in on this series, Death of a Game, where we investigate and take the largest contributing factors to a game's death or demise, and utilize a combination of evidence, testimonies, and detective wit to crack the case. Pay attention to the clues along the way, detectives, as they present themselves with a helpful hint graphic. And stay tuned to the very end of the video for a hint on what the next episode will be about. Hello everybody, and thank you to Geology for sponsoring this video again. Geology is a 16-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and Aspen Grooming Awards. They have 6,000 plus 5-star reviews, which obviously show that people love the product. Geology creates a simple and effective skin care and hair routine that's customized just for you, with ingredients that are proven to work. The products are built around just a handful of powerful but proven ingredients that have been tested by dermatologists for decades. Personally, I can have quite dry skin sometimes. When I use Geology's morning face wash, I haven't had that problem since. It really helps make me and my face feel refreshed in the morning. Not only is Geology the best in the skincare game, they've also released a bunch of new amazing hair and body and other skin products. Whatever you need, Geology has you covered. From affordable skin revitalizing vitamin C plus E plus ferulic acid serum to their shampoo killing co-wash, to their brand new body care of line body wash and deodorant, which honestly have some of the best scents ever, but that's just my opinion. If you're wondering how it works, well, you just click the link in the description that's provided and take a 30-second diagnostic quiz. And within a few clicks, you'll tell them about your skin and your goals. And their team of dermatologists will design a personalized routine just for you that's then shipped directly to your door. It's that simple. Right now, for a limited time, they're hooking you up with an absolutely insane offer. Use my code NERD70 and that will give you an additional 70% off of their award-winning skincare trial set. This discount stacks on top of other sale prices. And that's not all. On top of that, they're also giving you an additional bonus offer of one of their brand new skin, hair, or body products of your choice when you add it to your trial. But you have to get it before it's gone. So again, head to the description, use code NERD70, and take their free skincare diagnostic to get the 70% off. Thank you again to Geology for sponsoring this video, and thank you to the detectives who made it possible. Let's get back to the video. The story of Outriders starts with the beginning of its development. Sometime quietly in 2015, People Can Fly had just come off of a joint project on the popular third-person shooter franchise Gears of War and Fortnite, which were both Epic game projects. That was relevant because People Can Fly was acquired by Epic back in 2012, but went independent in 2015 once again. Prior to that, they launched Bulletstorm, which was their own unique shooter title that was every bit of absurd and pure unadulterated fun. That title, besides their old classic title Painkiller, probably got them the majority of their notoriety and reputation. But People Can Fly had more ambitions than just being a successful developer working on successful projects as a co-developer. They wanted to tackle yet another unique IP of their own. While development for their unique IP was ongoing throughout 2015 through 2018, it wasn't until May 16th of 2018 that rumors would hit the web concerning PCF possibly working with Square Enix as a publisher on a new shooter project. With the partnership came a significant team buff, with a reported 40 developers increasing in size, soaring to 200 developers, all tasked with working on the unannounced project. People Can Fly and Square Enix would announce their unnamed new shooter title February 11th, 2020. Outriders, confirmed to be an RPG shooter. People Can Fly kept stating strongly that Outriders wasn't a game as a service, but that they would try to work on the endgame because some people enjoy that, which they would confirm in the US Gamer article. Instead, People Can Fly says that Outriders will be a more traditional, story-driven experience. That story, Joshua Rubin would describe, the lead writer, as a really dark and brutal story, with inspirations like Joker, Heart of Darkness, and Apocalypse Now. Outriders wasn't a full RPG despite looking like Gears of Destiny Andromeda. It was more akin to an action game with RPG elements, also featuring inspirations, of course, from PCF's previous title Bulletstorm. But as the funny name full of inspirations implies, Outriders looked like a blend of a few different popular titles both in gameplay shown and visual graphics, though certainly visually impressive, utilizing the Unreal Engine 4. Outriders' whole pitch was that they were going to do the whole looter genre proud, with a unique story-focused title. That's why they distinguish between not being a game as a service after all, but the comments about how they look so similar to other games were already cropping up pretty early on. Outriders would be a cross-platform title, allow you to upgrade your next-gen copy for free, and supposedly be dropping holiday 2020. The release date for Outriders would be announced in October of 2020, set for February 2nd of the next year. By this point, quite a bit of the gameplay was shown for Outriders, which I have to give PCF credit for as it's a refreshing take on AAA gaming. Outriders was an online cooperative RPG shooter mixing cover-based gameplay with otherworldly powers due to your altered states by the anomalies of the world. And despite obvious Destiny comparisons, the marketing surrounding Outriders was that it was different because, well, it was like this real game, right? Not a game as a service. January 6, Outriders would suffer from a minor delay, only pushing the game to the end of the month of February instead of their original February 2nd, 2021 launch. And although I can't seem to, for some reason, find the official delay, or at least like the article saying the official delay, the game was very much delayed from that target launch date, with the new launch date set for April 1st, 2021. And no, it wasn't an April Fool's joke either. Although Outriders would be delayed, to keep the swarm of hungry fans satisfied, PCF would release a demo version of the game, which got everybody excited March 4th, 2021. That demo would see an impressive 2 million players. But the demo test wasn't without a hitch, as players would complain about server connectivity issues. Most worrying of all, this was even for players who were playing offline. That meant that although Outriders, as advertised over and over again, wasn't a game as a service, it was certainly an always online game, even when you were playing alone. People Can Fly would claim that the issues were due to the server's backends being heavily tested at once as intended in a beta. So the idea was that these issues would be ironed out closer to launch. That launch was supposed to technically happen already though, which meant that the game was certainly behind in some fashion. But PCF could never fix the fact that the game required an internet connection. Nope, not at this point. At this point it seemed to be baked into the game's design, against just about everyone's desire. The other major news that came with the demo and subsequent experiences was that Outriders would be coming to Xbox Game Pass subscription, making it available to millions of players who pay the monthly fee. This would greatly increase the chances that Outriders wouldn't be dead on arrival, at least regarding the population of the game. As it stood, the game was still a full-price $60 game, which would be a pretty heavy barrier for an online game. The next major question was going to be how long and fulfilling was the single-player campaign, as developers again had previously admitted that that's where the majority of the game would lie. If the single player was too short or just underwhelming, it would make something like the Xbox Game Pass thing seem like more of life support than a true boon to the game. So there was a lot riding on Outriders as a single-player game and the cooperative story experience, including the game's future and success. Outriders would launch on both generations of Xbox, PlayStation, and the PC, April 1st, 2021. According to the aggregate review website Metacritic, Outriders would score a 73 out of 100 from 32 different critics. While on Steam from over 43,000 users, Outriders would garner a mixed review score of 65%. Despite the mixed reception by both critics and players alike, Outriders was able to outperform its stablemate Marvel Avengers, which was the title that we mentioned that we also covered on our series. Outriders was able to attract an impressive over 100,000 peak players on Steam, was a top 10 selling digital game on the Xbox Store, and was the third best selling game in the US. But digging into the actual critical and audience receptions, however, well, tell a worse story. Although Outriders was selling well, at least seemingly, it seemed unlikely that it would persist with how poor the reception for the game overall had actually been. And for people feeling like the performance doesn't matter, and the people that are wondering why I'm even covering this game in the first place, well, remember, this game is online always. So if the servers get brought down, bye-bye game. Game Informer would give Outriders an impressive and probably their most glowing review, 9 out of 10. GI would remark that although the game wasn't revolutionary, it was a well thought out shooter with expertly tailored RPG twists. Essentially what some people deem as negative or unoriginal at the very least is that Outriders feels like this similar gumbo we've all tasted before. GI would argue that this makes the game better though, because it borrowed the best elements from those games. GameSpot, on the other hand, would score Outriders an 8 out of 10, also enjoying the impressive visuals present in the game and the variety of combat. GameSpot, like Game Informer, was also positive about the borrowed elements present in Outriders. PC Gamer was probably the most damning in their review, only giving the game a 63 out of 100, where their conclusion was that buried by an unsatisfied combat loop and bad campaign, Outriders is a forgettable loot game that ends right as it's getting started. PC Gamer would have some solid criticism though. Outriders campaign apparently was only 12 to 13 hours long. And that's for a $60 game, which was already a pretty high cost. Some people were arguing that that cost should be half of what it was. This was unfortunate because the story and lore of Outriders was actually quite quality for such an action shooter. The narrative was novel in Outriders and paced quite nicely. The worst part about the story was easily the ending, which effectively ended in a boss fight with a bullet sponge and a non-conclusion to your conclusion. And the endgame didn't seem that much more complex. It was the repetitive Mass Effect style missions that, while fun, just didn't have a long-term shelf life. Going back to the beginning, People Can Fly sort of admitted that from the beginning, their endgame wasn't going to be the saving grace for their game. Problem being, their story mode for single player was, while positively received, just not enough there to build the game into what it was appearing or trying to be. And it didn't help that people were perceiving the game to be more like Destiny, a game as a service, and that's probably because Outriders looked a lot like Destiny, even though it's blatantly not the same style of game. Effectively, People Can Fly, appealing to a different type of audience, even if it was an accident, or at least a different type of game design, had ended up alienating the audience that they ended up the most abundant in. The looter shooter fans just didn't have enough Outriders to play past the campaign and a few online missions, and there was a resounding lack of loot in a looter shooter. Something other looter shooters we have also covered on the series like Anthem and Marvel Avengers suffered from too. Most of the Steam reviews that are positive argue just this, that if you treat the game more like a single-player co-op, it's far more enjoyable, which shows how problematic appealing to too many players was for the Outriders. What if they just focused more on their original goal of being a narrative looter experience, instead of trying to have these forced online aspects in a single-player game? They could have worked on making more meat on the bones at the very least, right? Naturally, the always online thing reared its ugly head again. Turns out it wasn't just because of the stress test that there was connectivity issues, but due to some innate design in how connections worked. Trying to connect with players at varying connection levels was incredibly problematic, especially if they were on a Wi-Fi connection, and trying to play single player with a poor connection was essentially impossible. This meant that people were just simply unable to play the game due to how it was designed and impacted by the connectivity issues. Why PCF chose to make Outriders always online is a bit puzzling, when the main story campaign is the focus anyway. But I'm sure people in the comments now are saying that Square Enix had something to do with that. Square Enix had considered Outriders a success though, one that apparently wouldn't be out of the question to receive more titles in the universe. This was due to the game reaching 3.5 million players by April. But this felt like the standard corporation takes credit for something that they didn't actually really succeed at, because how this number is obtained wasn't stated, and Outriders was available on Game Pass, which means that that's probably where the majority of the players are coming from, right? A hollow success at best. The numbers would back that up, as within a mere month, the peak player count would drop from 125,000 players to 29,547, and by the end of the summer was already dipping as low as 4,000 plus players peak. The population would have a slight resurgence though following the New Horizon update, November 16th, 2021, which was a major balancing and performance-focused update, but also added the new expeditions for endgame and the transmog system. The balance changes, on the other hand, were quite extensive, which either speaks to the work that PCF would put in, or how unfinished the game was, right? Whichever it was, them being receptive to change was a good thing. Unfortunately, although the changes were positively received, the population would eventually drop back down, this time to 6,339 players peak. Outriders would get a much anticipated new content release, June 30th, 2022, the nerdSlayer expansion, which would cost $40 and feature a continuation of the story, new lands, new enemies, and new gear. The gameplay would also evolve, with each class now getting 2 subclasses. The nerdSlayer expansion would also at a later date add the in-game mode dubbed Trial of Taria Gratar. IGN would score the update a 7 out of 10, where they stated that Outriders nerdSlayer is an enjoyable but unambitious expansion that improves the endgame while falling short in many of the same areas as the base game before it. The story is still pretty lackluster, most boss fights are irritating slogs, and even with the added in-game grind, there isn't a ton of content to chew on, but most of what's been added is at least a ton of fun. This was being pretty nice for the review, because the audience reception standards were way worse. Fans were just extremely angry because they felt that Outriders launched with a lean content offering to begin with, and felt that there was a bit of a bait and switch, and suddenly instead of more consistent content updates or content updates period, which kind of goes back to my point about the expectations of it being kind of Destiny-like in a game as a service, they were being sold a $40 expansion, which would bring the game's total cost up to $100. The game felt overpriced to start with. That was a common complaint with the whole lean 12-hour story offering. But now with another lean story offering, even if it is quality, fans just weren't satisfied. They didn't feel like they were getting a proper bang for their buck. Outriders got some more balancing changes post-nerdSlayer expansion as well, but despite these 2 major efforts, the population by August 2022 would drop back down to 3,015 players. According to People Can Fly, Outriders hadn't turned a profit, because they hadn't gotten royalties for the project yet. That meant that despite Square Enix's claims about success, it seems that Outriders wasn't nearly as successful as it was being led to be. This was about as clear as it got. A publisher has the incentive to lie about success and make a big stink about it to their investors. But the developer doesn't usually lie about this unless they're trying to lie to the publisher, I guess, right? But the publisher knows the numbers, and sadly, despite it being an interesting title, Outriders wasn't impressing enough players to bring in the money. Outriders' final update would be August 25th, 2022, which might be some of the leanest patch offerings that I have seen for some time. We have essentially 3 line items with no promises of more changes, updates, or content to come. That's probably the most egregious part for me. Not only has Outriders only gotten enough updates to count on 2 hands, the updates here, for example, are very lean and offer nothing in the way of future planning, or even a conversation about it. It brings me back to the beginning of the video, where People Can Fly were bragging about not having a roadmap because that meant that they weren't a game as a service, but it seemed like a roadmap would be pretty helpful right now to keep the game around. Because even if it's a main story-focused game, that offering was still too lean and only allowed online. So if PCF decided to pull the plug, it meant that nobody was going to be able to play Outriders anymore. By November 2022, population peak for Outriders had dropped to just 900 peak players, the lowest it had ever been historically according to Steam charts. Every detective needs a theme song, and I can hear mine playing right now. Which means that we have gathered enough clues thus far, and it's time to put them together for our final deduction concerning the largest contributing factors in the death of a game, Outriders. Lack of its own unique identity. Poor polish and performance. Not enough content and an expensive expansion. Always online, even when you're playing alone. Poor post-live support. Gotta have some sort of community, otherwise you're just a customer. People Can Fly's reputation likely takes a slight hit due to the fizzling out support of Outriders, more so than the game not doing that well. But they are very much a talented company that's capable. They also aren't the only company to grow to a larger size and scale for a given project and fail in their first endeavor following such. I hope they go back to the drawing board and learn from their mistakes so that they can take that into their next project, whatever that project may be. They still have a legacy to build and be remembered by. Meanwhile, Outriders, on the other hand, even in the most positive lights, will struggle to be remembered due to how similar it was to everything else at the time. So use this episode of Death of a Game as a remembrance of Outriders, and what could have been had the title not been handled in the way that kind of sealed its fate. Thanks for watching, detectives.